Lecture 4. The Wisdom of Daoism. Heaven and man integrated as one, and Tao follows nature. How does Daoism describe the different levels of the entire universe? In chapter 38 of the Daoism, we read that when Tao is lost, there is virtue, De, left. When De is lost, there is humanity, Ren. When humanity is lost, there is justice, Yi. When justice is lost, there is etiquette, Li. When etiquette is lost, there is benefit, Li. What does all this mean? Tao represents the wisdom of the nth dimensional space and approaches infinity. When it comes to the n-1th dimension, the Tao is lost. From n-1th dimension to the 4th dimension, virtue is the prevailing characteristic of all these dimensions. In the Chinese language, we have used great virtue and high expectations, and heavy virtue carries all things to describe virtue. When virtue is lost, one enters the 3rd dimension, a dimension with the characteristics of humanity. The word for humanity, Ren, is formed with a person on the left and a figure 2 on the right. In my opinion, this word Ren signifies 2 men. One is a man of a physical form, and the other is an invisible man of energy. Or, I shall say, one is a man in the form of particles, and the other is in the form of waves. Ren represents great love. As everyone knows, love is the greatest energy that can be felt in the 3-dimensional world. Through the Daoism, we have come to understand the descriptions of the different levels of the entire universe from a Taoist's perspective, which is highly compatible with the descriptions that I have given. In Taoism, heaven and man integrated as one is one of the most important doctrines. What does heaven and man integrated as one mean? The world in which we live is a 3-dimensional world. Compared with the nth dimensional universe and approaches infinity, our world is minimal next to the presence of existence. When we understand that 3, infinity equals to 0, so is 4, 5, or any actual figure, because when compared with the infinite dimensional universe, the limited number of dimensions, medium in size, is next to nothing and could be considered non-existing. This echoes the description in the Diamond Sutra that all things contrived are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, a dewdrop, or lightning. One should have such a view. If, through cultivation, one was able to enter higher and higher dimensions, and one could get closer and closer to the nth dimension, the number of the dimension he would be in would be close to infinity. Therefore, the formula becomes infinity. Infinity equals to 1. This would be the situation where one is truly integrated with heaven. However, currently, in our 3-dimensional world, we are restricted in our mindset and are only able to deal with relationships in a limited sense. These relationships include the relationship between heaven and man, the universe and man, and spatial objects and man. However, from the nth dimension, one could see the universe from a perspective far beyond our imagination and knowledge. The genuine concept of heaven and man integrated as one means that the wisdom level of one person is the same as that in the nth dimension. There is another very subtle dimension, the 0 dimension. I have talked about it in the first lecture. The 0 dimension is a mass point without interior, which could not be further divided. According to the nature of the transmission of waves, each mass point in the universe contains the full information of the universe and the connections among all information. In other words, it contains the full wisdom of the universe. In fact, the nth dimension has the same nature as the zero dimension. This is a description of the entire universe, and this description contains all the information in the universe. This could be called the genuine concept of heaven and man integrated as one. Through such a cosmic view, we would be able to have a comprehensive view of the universe, of the Tao, and understand why it is everywhere and at any time. Let me try and illustrate this through a Chinese character. Once again, I'll use the word Tai, as in Taiji. As explained before, the character Da represents the nth dimension and approaches infinity, and the dot beneath it represents the zero dimension, a mass point. Therefore, the character Tai represents the entire universe, and this is the greatness and subtlety of the Chinese language. Let us now have a look at the distribution of energy in the different dimension levels. To explain the distribution from simple energy stacking to the complex formation of real-world objects, I would need to first explain the numerology of the Yi Jin. Yi Jin. We are talking about a single sine wave. When there is another wave of the same frequency and amplitude under certain conditions, these two waves would start to interfere with each other. Due to the characteristics of energy distribution in space, part of the waves will be strengthened while part will diminish, which will result in the interference fringes. These fringes are reflected by the term Se, or form, in Buddhism. When the conditions for interference are not matured, despite the existence of the energies, there would not be forms. This condition is described in Buddhism as Kong, or empty, or void. Hence the famous saying in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form too is not other than emptiness. Further, they are not defiled, and they are not undefiled. They are not deficient, and they are not complete. The stacking and interference of two waves could be described in a formula. Left bracket A plus B, right bracket square equals to 1. When this formula is extended, it becomes A square plus B square plus AB plus BA equals to 1. And they correspond to the Tai Yang, the fire element, Tai Yin, the water element, Shao Yang, the wood element, and Shao Yin, the metal element, as have been described in the Yi Jin. The combined energy of all these reflects the earth element. The energies of the 5 elements are actually the result of the interference of two waves, manifesting in the distribution of the 5 energies. As mentioned before, the interference fringes, or stripes, are called images. If we put on the wall a picture of the holographic interference fringes, we would know, based on the principles of optics, that this picture consisted of an infinite number of interference fringes, as each of the fringes is a reflection of one information unit. When we look at the interference fringe from a different perspective, from the left or from the right, we would see a different picture. This demonstrates that the energy wave of the mind is different in different people. The energy wave of the mind in this picture is different from the reconstructed wave. Hence, a third energy wave appears, namely left bracket A plus B, right bracket cubed equals to 1. When this formula is extended, it becomes A cubed plus AAB plus ABA plus BAA plus ABB plus BAB plus BBA plus B cubed equals to 1. The extended formula above corresponds with the 8 trigrams, the 八卦. Let me put it this way. The 8 trigrams represent the images of the most basic object forms in our three-dimensional world. These 3 lines, solid or broken, are the 3 interference stripes. When the images of the 8 trigrams, or of the 8 pieces of information, being the compilation of yet unrevealed information, are stacked together, they form the 64 formations, which represent the basic element of the entire existence of objects in our three-dimensional world. I call them the basic spectrums. This, as mentioned before, is the numerology of the Yi Jin. If we could explain this numerology to those who do not understand the Chinese language or the abstract text in the Yi Jin, they would be able to understand that Yi Jin describes the origin of things in this universe. The energies of the single wave, the 2 waves, and the 3 waves correspond to the concept of Dao produces 1. 1 produces 2, 2 produces 3, and 3 produces all things. In this three-dimensional world, all things could be put into one of the 64 categories, which are the basic forms of distribution. When furthermore, these 64 forms of distribution are stacked together, they represent all things in our universe. The Yi Jin describes the law of such stacking. With the change of time and space, the images of all things change too. From the above discussions, we would understand that the 3rd energy wave is the most important one to us, as what we are able to see is determined by the images rendered by our 3rd energy wave, and the 3rd energy wave is actually emanated by the observer. The energy spectrum, namely the frequency characteristics, is a manifestation of the observer's knowledge. This is described in Buddhism as karma. What we see in this world is a projection of what we know. Based on what we know, our mind creates a world. This is why the Buddhists say all Dhamma is subject to the mind, and all forms are created by the mind. However, the entire universe is not just a three-dimensional world. Let's have a look at this picture of Taiji. This picture could be drawn with one continuous line. We could continue to make it smaller and smaller until infinity. We could also continue to make it larger and larger until infinity. I call this picture the Multi-Dimensional Taiji. It demonstrates the fact that in different dimensions in the universe, there exist the energy distributions in the forms such as 两仪, 2 spheres, 四象, 4 forms, and 八卦, 8 trigrams. In other words, there exist different life forms in different dimensions. The energy relationship that we could feel in the three-dimensional world, even in the 4-dimensional space, is also distributed in this same pattern. This is what I refer to as the horizontal and vertical cosmic views. In the wisdom of Daoism, there is a system which is closely related to us. That is Chinese medicine, which has its origin in the Yi Jin, a system with folded or stacked energies. As mentioned before, all things in our world are images resulting from interference fringes of energy waves. The most important factor for images to be formed is the relative balance of energies. In other words, when 2 energy waves are in balance, their interference fringes result in images. The balance of energy, the balance of yin and yang, is the foundation of all things in the universe. In Chinese medicine, illness or disease has its location or nest, its situation, and manifesting images. When one is ill, he is not in a state of balance in terms of energy. The treatment, therefore, in Chinese medicine is to interrupt the imbalance and resume the balance in the body. When this is achieved, one becomes healthy. Western medicine uses an adversarial method to combat illness or disease. For example, a counter-sine wave would be used for treating a sine wave condition. At a precise calculation, the illness could be offset. However, the counter-sine wave could harm other parts of the body and result in side effects. This is one of the characteristics of Western medicine. When a doctor writes his prescriptions, he always needs to tell his patient that in the hope of treating the targeted illness, this medication could bring harm to other parts of your body. Chinese medicine, on the other hand, treats illness by way of balancing energies in accordance with the law of the 5 elements in a systematic way. Energy balance is the goal of treatment in Chinese medicine. One of the principles in Chinese medicine is the theory of 子午流注. 子午流注 is a method in traditional Chinese medicine which applies the best use of time when an acupoint's energy is at its ultimate level. The distribution of energy in any given dimension is in the forms of 两仪, 2 spheres, 四象, 4 forms, and 八卦, 8 trigrams. On the time annex in the 4th dimension, such distribution is in place as well. With this as a general rule, one would be able to see the patterns of changes, and one would understand that good Chinese medicine practitioners treat illness with different methods at different times and places. We know that at different times of the day, our organs' ability to repair themselves depends on the strength of their inner energy. Each of our organs' characteristic energy distribution could be described corresponding to the 5 elements, namely metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. When time is considered in this dynamic process, the theory of 子午流注 comes into play. Therefore, if a good practitioner could determine the right time for the right energy to be at its peak, he would easily help the patient achieve energy balance among the organs. On the contrary, if a practitioner does not know this theory or apply treatment at the wrong time, he might not receive good treatment results. What's worse, he could bring negative effects to his patient. This is why Chinese practitioners attach great importance to the time of treatment. Now, I'd like to mention another important theory, the heavenly stems and the earthly branches. The sequential numbers of 甲, Yi, and 丙 all the way to 人 and 癸 are the 10 heavenly stems, while the 子, 丑, and 寅 all the way to 戌 and 亥 are the 12 earthly branches. The heavenly stems and the earthly branches system represents a vertical distribution of energy associated with time. It follows the energy relationship of the 5 elements. The earthly branches represent the energy relationship in our 3-dimensional world, and the heavenly stems represent the horizontal distribution of energy. The moment the heavenly stems and the earthly branches are stacked, the vertical and horizontal energies interfere with each other. And this is the moment when all things in the 3-dimensional world are created. In other words, the moment the energies from a higher dimension are projected in the lower dimension is the moment of creation. For example, the birth time of a person, as described in 8 characters, is just such a critical moment that decides the energy in the 3-dimensional world. This point of time contains the energy information which could be interpreted to tell or predict all things that are to happen in that person's life and all people that he's going to meet too. Let me give you another example. My hand is a three-dimensional object. If I put my open palm in between a light source and the wall, a shadow, the shape of my palm, would appear on the wall. If one is on that two-dimensional wall and tries to trace the outline of the palm and started from where my thumb is, he wouldn't know what would be coming next. However, when viewed from the three-dimensional world away from the wall, one could easily see the whole picture on the two-dimensional wall. By the same theory, when viewing from a higher dimension, all things in the lower dimension would be very clear. This is the essence of the heavenly stems theory, provided with the correct birth time of a person. A good Chinese medicine practitioner would also be able to calculate and tell which organ would be in an inferior state and when this patient would become ill. Now, let's have a look at the acupoints and the meridians in a body according to Chinese medicine. It is very hard to locate the acupoints by physical measurements as they cannot be felt externally. What exactly is an acupoint? It is a focal point of energy from a higher dimension. For a camera to take a picture, it needs a lens, which has a focal point to convert a three-dimensional object onto a two-dimensional film. The focal point is usually unknown to most people. Actually, the focal point is a point which enables the full-dimensional energy to be projected in our three-dimensional bodies, organs, and cells. A series of focal points of the same nature form a meridian. This is the inner connection between the Chinese medicine system and the higher dimensional energies. The treatment in Chinese medicine using acupoints and meridians is likened to spectrum management in the principles of light. The energy level of the focal points located at different spots can be adjusted to accommodate different amounts of light going through the aperture. The larger the aperture, the more energy. The adjustment of the aperture is the key, which achieves a balance of energy among the images. The balance of energy is the healthy state. From the above explanations, we can understand the close relationship between Chinese medicine and high-dimensional energy. In today's medical education system, Western education methods are in a more dominant position, and a lot of the essence of Chinese medicine has been neglected. When we truly understand the spirit in the Yi Jin and the Yellow Emperor's inner classics, and understand the energy relationships within the body, we would understand the levels of Chinese medicine practitioners. There are 3 levels: the low, the medium, and the high practitioners. It is because of the different approaches to medicine that there are these 3 different levels of Chinese medical practitioners. The lower practitioners in my description are the ones who can only use the 3-dimensional view to treat illness. Such practitioners could not even compete with those who are practicing Western medicine, as they would not have their enriched experiences and problem-solving skills. The medium-level practitioners would apply the higher dimensional energy to solve problems in the 3-dimensional world. But if the theories which I have just mentioned, 子午流注, the heavenly stems theory, and the acupoints and the meridians are not being used with higher dimensional energy taken into account, their use would be limited. The high-level Chinese medicine practitioners are those who have formed the cosmic view of heaven and man integrated as one. Therefore, treatment methods adopted by the high-level practitioners may seem odd to some people. For example, the mechanism adopted may not have a direct connection to the patient's symptoms. Yet, these practitioners can effectively treat illness and disease. The reason for this is that they are able to identify and deal with the essence of the issue by dealing with the energies. They are able to use the energy distributed in color, in food, in music, and space to facilitate treatments. Their treatments will not be limited to any set formula, and they could not and should not be followed and repeated in a standard way. Let me explain this point more clearly. For example, there is a point on the table, a two-dimensional plane. I can use my hand and swipe past that point on the table easily. If I were to use a stone and try to hit that same point, the possibility is uncertain. In other words, the link between higher dimensional energy and three-dimensional energy is uncertain. The medium and high-level Chinese medicine practitioners are referred to as the Daoism, practitioners of Dao, as they are able to use or adjust the higher dimensional energy for the purpose of treatment. To adjust the images in the projection source, which is in the higher dimension, is what is known as the technique of 注油. 注油, the last of the 13 divisions of traditional Chinese medicine, uses the images of different energies in the projection source to achieve an offsetting result. Chinese medicine is very profound, and this is beyond the understanding of those who only possess three-dimensional knowledge. The successful treatment cases adopted by the high-level practitioners cannot be simply copied and repeated. This is very different from the Western medicine approach. Western medicine, as all Western science in the three-dimensional realm, is based on repetition and requires the results to be the same in large numbers of tests. Such rigid and repetitive testing is not the practice of Chinese medicine, which would view it as an attempt of three-dimensional thought to try and maneuver the universal wisdom. It is a sad thing for one to use a low-dimensional wisdom to deal with high-dimensional wisdom, even though it is true that practice is the sole criteria in testing truth. Three-dimensional truth can only be tested by rules in the three-dimensional world. Low-dimensional wisdom cannot test truth in higher dimensions. High-level dimension practices are embedded in the treatments of Chinese medicine, which is far beyond the scope of skills and techniques of our three-dimensional world. Currently, the only school of science that could understand and match the practices of Chinese medicine is quantum medicine. Quantum reflects the critical stage between the physical space and the higher dimensional world, and it can reflect the energy wave and its high-dimensional nature. Modern physics has reached a very important conclusion. Quantum physics test results are influenced by the power of mind. We understand that the mind of human beings refers to those parts of energies that has not been stacked and formed into images. When we enter the fourth dimension, our superconsciousness has high-dimensional energy, and the mind power energy dominates the physical energy. This is the essence of Eastern wisdom. In other words, the projection source determines the projected images. This is a very simple logic. However, if we limit our understandings to the physical world, and if we try to test the entire universe with the knowledge obtained in the three-dimensional world only, we'd be committing a mistake in logic. We may have all encountered the mathematics problem of calculating the number of chickens and rabbits in the same cage. At the primary level, this problem seems very hard to tackle, and it is a single-dimensional operation on one axis. However, when conceived algebraically, this problem becomes easy. Let the number of the chickens equals to x. The number of rabbits equals to y. The total number of heads equals to x plus y. And the total number of feet of these animals equals to 2x plus 4y. With this formula, the problem is very easy to work out. This is a typical example of solving a two-dimension problem using a single-dimension mechanism. If all two-dimension problems could be solved using the single-dimension mechanism, that would be ideal, but so far it is impossible. Einstein's theory of relativity is an exception in which he used third-dimensional logic to solve a fourth-dimensional problem. No other person has ever done anything like this. We human beings are trying the most primitive methods to solve problems. We use algebra and apply figures in the place of actual objects. The more we do this, the more possible it is for us to find a pattern. This is the essence of mathematical experiments. In summary, the repetitive experiments, when compared with the high-dimension practices, are the primitive methods to find patterns, for example, the use of statistics and big data. The real method to conduct experiments is to enter the higher dimensions. This is the real method to solve problems.